Hello, everybody, and welcome to Alternative Interactions. I'm Gary. So, today, as promised from a couple of shows back, we're going to look at the City of London and the fact that the United Kingdom or Great Britain actually has no money. So, I'll repeat that statement again. Um, the United Kingdom and Great Britain have no money. There is no money in the United Kingdom or Great Britain. All the money is in the City of London. Now, what makes the City of London unique is the fact that it's its own separate country, an entity, and has no connection whatsoever with England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. And yet, we're paying taxes to them and we're controlled by them, a private country. Now, obviously, it makes up the three pillars. And for those you are, who are uncertain of this, the three pillars are the control mechanism that we have been under for a very long time. Now, the three pillars represents fundamentally the Vatican, and we will look at them a little bit coming up. I've got a slideshow. The City of London and Washington, D.C. The D.C. standing for the District of Columbia, or Christopher Columbus, or Christoph Columbi, who was kicked out of Spain. So, history as we know it really is a crock of, and certainly the deception of money and how it's been used against us is a crock of. So, I think we're going to start with a slideshow now because this is a very interesting. I've taken one of the slides from, let me just go to share screen. One of the slides from, there we go. Now, fundamentally, this is from a program that was aired when they were talking about money. Um, I think I've shared this in shorts and clips, and I've certainly seen it on Instagram and wherever. Not sure if I've got it saved as such, but it's a very, very interesting, very powerful speech. And it starts at the top, as you can see quite clearly. The City of London, the financial capital of the world, isn't part of the UK or EU. And at that time, we were in the EU when this was aired. It was founded as Londinium by Rome in 43 AD, and it's 1 square mile that's still owned by the Vatican. And there's a lot of shenanigans that have gone on with this, and I'm going to go through these shenanigans with everybody just so we can. Let me just move myself up to the top corner. There's been a lot of shenanigans gone on, and certainly I'm going to be showing you some of the shenanigans and who's behind it and who was behind it and how with not just the United Kingdom or Great Britain, but how the world has been manipulated and controlled. So, when this was said, that the response to some of the interviewers was quite shock, and the guy who spoke about this is a guy called Professor Robert Werner. And I've shared some of his stuff before. Now, Professor Robert Werner is very, very clever, and he's actually done a series or a program that I shared on my Telegram a good while back regarding how money is created out of fresh air, and he actually proved it. Proved it. So, the City of London acts as a debtor state of the Western world. If you're a citizen, legalese, citizen, You become the debtor trustee of the foreign military accounts of the Roman Empire. Rome never fell. Regardless of what you're told, Rome never fell. It evolved and changed. So this is foreign military accounts of the Roman Empire administrative system. City of London in capital letters, which is now corporation. The Vatican occult. You're no longer considered living. You're assumed dead, lost at sea, the Cestui Act of 1666, and you become the surname or cogman of Rome. Now, cogman is fundamentally a slave to ownership, part of their wealth. Now, Rome was created, or Rome created in 43 AD, Londinium. It was actually only a half a mile square, not the true whole mile square of today. And I've included this because I think it's quite funny. Let me just move me down so you can see that's fine. There we go. With the slide now, history. Come on, guys. They can't even get the story right. His story can't be got right yet. Over this, and it just shows what a pile it really is. Now, Roman London was formed in 120 to 150 AD and protected by a large fort. Well, Boadicea, Boudica of the Iceni, East Anglian tribe, destroyed Londinium in 60 AD, as well as many other Roman places, Colchester, etc. She came down. And it said at the top here, at least one house was occupied in 40, still receiving supplies from the Mediterranean. They basically said that for 400 years, there was no London. There was nothing there bar one house receiving supplies from the Mediterranean. And yet, in other history, we get that from around 120 to 150 AD, a large fort was built. And then they go on to 150 to 225 AD, a large fort was built. So I'm really not quite sure what happened, because they're saying that people were there and weren't there. I mean, come on, guys, get your act together. It's a bit of a joke. But what we certainly do have is part of an old wall and the square mile of London that was obviously some kind of Roman outpost for a very long time, and a wall was certainly built around, around 200 AD, to protect the port and the seafaring usage of Rome and whoever else was dealing with them. Okay, but it just shows you how. I mean, come on, they can't even get the history right of this. So they can't get the history right. It kind of smells dodgy straight away. It really does smell dodgy straight away. Now, this is an expert from The Nameless War by Archibald Ramsey. Very good book. I have got a PDF of it on my Telegram group. If you go into the top bar on the Telegram group and go on to files, I think it's one of the top files. You click on that and you can share it to yourself and you can open it up or find it. Now, the book itself is very, very interesting and tells a very interesting story about what's happened in modern history. It's not a very big book, it's only a small book. But what I want to concentrate here is a 1215 Magna Carta, because for the City of London, this is key. We obviously, you can read the rest of this, about what's gone on. and the banishment of a certain race of Zionists. We'll call them Zionists. And this gentleman here, Oliver Cromwell, and these people, the Zionists from Amsterdam and the rebellion against King James II, and the creation of the Bank of England. It's all kind of there, isn't it? As a national debt institution or instituted. So the national debt was instituted, and I will be going into this later. But as you can see, we have interesting accounts, and I'm obviously not going to be saying a lot about this because they do monitor the words. But please read this and take a screenshot if you want. But this is actually in the book. It's directly from the book. But we're going to be talking about the Magna Carta. Um, Now, the Magna Carta, the history of the Magna Carta. The City of London played an active role in the events that led to the Magna Carta's creation in 1215. And the mayor, later known as the Lord Mayor, was appointed along with the barons to see that provisions were carried out. London was also the only city specifically named in the documents and in the clause that stated that the City of London shall have all its ancient liberties by land as well as by water maintained fundamentally. Now it's interesting that only London was named. No other city was. And the City of London refers to the Roman square mile only. Be very clear about that. Now, we have, of course, got skullduggery here because we all think in the United Kingdom that 1215 Magna Carta and that's it. And if you're lucky to have been taught about it, in fact. But there are actually at least two different versions of the Magna Carta. And previous versions and later versions have the City of London mentioned in two different places. We have the City of London shall enjoy all its ancient liberties of free customs both by land, sea and water from the 1215. And this is option 13, but in the later Magna Carta it's done, but it's 9. It's subsection 9 and not subsection 13. So I just want to explain that there's different variations of the Magna Carta, but the only thing that maintained in that Magna Carta consistently was the London stuff, which again is very, very interesting. So, the 1215 is version 9, and the other date is 1275, which is 13. So anyway, over the years, Magna Carta developed great significance, especially for the Americans. And this is the Declaration of Independence of 1776, which was based on our Magna Carta. Don't want to upset too many people on this, but the Magna Carta had Zionist influence and Vatican City influence. Strange how the two would be working together, I guess, or not. As if you do your research, you'll find out. Remember, the Vatican is called the Vatican after Vatica, the goddess of the underworld. And the Vatican use a small hat, and so do a certain race of people who are connected to the Zionism. Zionists have a small hat as well. Anyway, the City of London Corporations 1297, which is the later version of the Magna Carta, includes Edward I's seal and the original writ declared to the Sheriffs of London. And the original writ is the original 1215 15 version, which is article subsection 9 of that. Okay. And ordering that the charter be promulgated within the city. The charter was confirmed by Parliament, which gave the document statutory force. So in 1297, Parliament and the King ratified by the Magna Carta the via the Sheriffs of London. Now, it's very interesting when we talk about the Sheriffs of London, and we'll go into this perhaps a little bit more near the end. But the Sheriffs of London are not necessarily nice people and are totally and utterly connected to and would have been part of certain organizations that would have been connected to, and as we would know, Masonic Freemasonry today, Knights Templar and such like. So we have a lot of skullduggery going on here. And remember, you know, the Roman Catholic Church was fully involved in all of this, creating what it wanted, a control mechanism via their funding via the Zionists. Now, we're going to jump forward in history and go on to this chap, Oliver Cromwell. Now, there was obviously lots of shenanigans going on pre this, certainly was. But Cromwell is when the story really takes a twist and becomes very, very, very important because Cromwell really is not our friend nor your friend watching this, because your enslavement directly links to, and I'm talking about financial enslavement of our current system, directly goes to this gentleman. Big statement. Now, Oliver Cromwell died in 1658. He was an English statesman, politician, and soldier, widely regarded as one of the most important figures in British history. Well, Britain didn't exist then, so I don't know how it could be British history. This is English history. But of course, you know, why get a few facts in the way? And again, the Magna Carta currently has no standing as a legal document. If you go to court, particularly, you're going to struggle because it states England and it's the English Bill of the Constitution, and we're now under Great Britain. So it's strange how the City of London can still use an ancient document and law in which the commoners can't. Just throwing that one out there as well. Anyway, he was prominent during the wars of the Three Kingdoms, which have been Wales, Ireland, Scotland, England, and the Parliamentary Army latterly as a politician. We're going to get into that one and all because he really wasn't a politician. He was a mouthpiece for our control mechanism, and we'll get into that. He was a leading advocate of the execution of Charles I in January 1649, and this is key because as once Charles I was executed by Mr. Cromwell and his Zionist friends, it really was the end and why we're where we are today financially. There was the establishment of the Commonwealth of England. Again, the Commonwealth of England doesn't say Britain, does it? Or United Kingdom. Very clear here in the language. The Commonwealth of England. Cromwell ruled as Lord Protector from December 1653 until his death of 1658. He was, in effect, in charge of the Republic of the United Kingdom or Great Britain. So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at the financing And I'm not going to read all of this out, but please do screenshot it if you're very interested. And again, it comes from the book, The Nameless War. And we can clearly see that there is Dutch by Amsterdam shenanigans going on. And we can clearly see that there are letters from Zionist money controllers to Cromwell talking about the assassination and this and organizing the assassination of James, or sorry, Charles the first. I think that speaks for itself. I'm not going to go any further into that, but we can clearly see shenanigans, Zionist shenanigans. Now, as we go into the 1700s, the political and economic union of England and Scotland was forced upon Scotland, and they were forced to take on the national debt, which was created via the Bank of England's creation. But what I've included this for was the fact that Oliver Cromwell, while he was in charge, disbanded Parliament how it was and created a new Parliament, new joint Parliament. And in the split there, they challenged the state of affairs. This was the shenanigans going on, right? Because what we actually have is the creation of the two-party system by Oliver Cromwell. Now, before Cromwell took over, there was not a two-party system. And I'm sure it is somewhere along here, fight against the political rule, using their new disadvantaged power, when the policies. Oops, sorry. I've got a banner here that's getting in the way. I'm not sure this is the one, but it certainly was that they created a two-party system to divide and conquer within the debt that had been created by the Bank of England in 1694. And we can quite clearly see that gold was soon to become the basis of loans and 10 times the size amount of the deposits. So here we have the first fractional reserve banking system on gold in the United Kingdom or in England that would then go around the world. And we can see that the use of usury ledger loans was very much part of the new system. Now, James II, very key guy in what was going on, and it was he was the last Catholic monarch. So being Catholic, it was the Roman Catholic Church and Rome, the Vatican. Now it's very interesting that he was deposed in 1688 because what we have in 1688 was James II, just before he was deposed, reinstating the Roman Catholic control and divinity over the city of London. Now, I've got all the monarchs here because I want just to show you that 1649, when Charles was taken out, Charles I, we then have a gap of 11 years before Charles II comes in for a short period, and then we have James the Second coming in. It's very confusing. We then have William, and this is William of Orange, and we have the William and Mary saga, and William really was not our friend or anybody else's friend for that matter. But another thing that's very interesting about James II, and obviously he was deposed by the Glorious Revolution, which is Oliver Cromwell, is when we look at this image of him, look at the hand gesture, the M hand gesture, the Masonic hand gesture. Just saying. Bad actors playing roles. It's very interesting as well that when James finally went, that the English Parliament was given primacy for control over the crown. Now, if that is that the crown itself as in the monarchy, or is it the crown as in the committee of the crown? Because the committee of the crown goes to something called the Committee of 300. And there is a lot of stuff on my Telegram about the Committee of 300, and I'm really not going to be going into that one in a hurry because that's very, very dark. Now, we have another key player in the creation of the Bank of England. And this is a guy called John Churchill. And John Churchill is a direct relative to Winston Churchill, who was part of the Balfour Declaration and its instigation into the issues we currently have now in the Middle East with the country I. He was the first Duke of Marlborough. Now, his title was John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, 1st Prince of Middledom, 1st Count of Nellenberg. Nellenberg is in Austria. I didn't look where Millenberg was, but Nellenberg is in Austria. And he's also a Prince of the Holy Roman Empire. We can obviously see, if I just move myself out of the way there so you can just read that a bit better. There we go. It's a title, A Peerage of England. It was created by the Queen Anne in 1702 for John Churchill. So after he'd created and done all the things he'd done, he was looked after. We can also see that he's part of the House of Stuart and the Duke and with Duke of York. And all these lovely, lovely people that we have today. Now, something that I do want to show you, it's very, very interesting, is his coat of arms. And we have a double-headed eagle. Think back where you've seen that before. It's the same as the Rothschilds, same as Germany. Here's these links here. And same as Russia. You know. So, yeah. Very, very interesting. Very interesting how we're still saddled by these people's lineage today. Now, Oliver Cromwell, the Amsterdam Zionists financed. We also have in 1689 William of Orange coming over. Remember, I spoke about William and Mary. Very interesting. Now, when we go back to the first Duke of Marlborough, Mr. Churchill, he was being paid by the same group that were paying Oliver Cromwell £6,000 a year. Very interesting. Now, we have these people following over William of Orange, and William of Orange, I think, landed on the 5th of November. Could be why we have the 5th of November and we celebrate it. Perhaps it's nothing to do with Guy Fawkes, and it's all to do with the celebration via the Zionists of William of Orange coming over to then take over England and create ultimately the Bank of England via the national debt. Now, we can see here John Churchill, first Duke of Marlborough's involvement in this. There's the £6,000, by the way. The chief figure among those who deserted James at a critical juncture was John Churchill. It's interesting to read that the Jewish encyclopedia is that this Duke for many years was receiving no less than £6,000 a year from the Dutch Zionist Solomon Media, who was the one who followed William of Orange over and financed William of Orange to take over via the royal lineage. So we can see that we have a Vatican State Golden Mile set up in the City of London that's protected by law, a takeover of Parliament, the British or the UK or the English Parliament as it was then, and we can see that the same people financing all of this skullduggery then bring in their own king to take over England, lock, stock, and barrel. The real objective of the Glorious Revolution was achieved a few years later, and in 1694, when the royal consent was given, and he was always going to be given, wasn't it? Because who's backing um, William of Orange? Yes. Was for setting up the Bank of England inside the private country of the City of London. And the institution of the national debt. So this is when we got the 10-to-1 lending on gold and usury or interest at 4% on the people. This charter handed out to an anonymous committee, the Royal Prerogative of Minting Money. So they could then, anonymous committee, which is the Dutch Zionists, the ability to mint money converted on the basis of wealth of gold, 10-to-1, and to enable the international money lenders to secure their loans on the taxes of the country. International money lenders to secure their loans on the taxes of the country. So the taxes of the English people, the British or Great Britain or United Kingdom, again, United Kingdom is a PLC, the taxes don't go to the UK, Great Britain or England because they don't have any money. They go to a private country called the City of London, which uses the taxes in whichever way they feel to pay the loans off. And we are fundamentally, via our taxes, bankrolling the debt created by central banks around the world, or the BIS, Bank of International Settlement, that's in charge of this now. They just moved locations. Now, From the time economic machinery was set up in motion, which ultimately reduced all wealth to the fictitious term of gold, which the Zionists control, and drained away the lifeblood of the land, the real wealth, which was the birthright of the British peoples. The birthright of the British people was stolen away by Zionists who controlled Parliament and the King via Oliver Cromwell's deals. The political and economic union of England and Scotland was shortly afterwards forced upon Scotland, as I said, with the national debt. Remember, the City of London shall have all old liberties and customs which have faith to have views. Moreover, we will grant that all other cities, boroughs, towns, and the barons of the five ports, and all other ports shall have their liberties and free customs. Well, we don't, but the City of London still does. So if the City of London, this is chapter 13 for the 1275 Magna Carta, the City of London still maintains that custom, why doesn't every other single city, borough, and town? I think somebody's been done over here, don't you? And I've included Article 9 of the 1215 one just here because again I mentioned it before. Um, Neither nor bailiffs shall seize any land or rent for debt as long as the debtor's chattels suffice to pay the debt. Very interesting, isn't it? That they're talking about debt and who they can kick out and who they can't kick out in the Magna Carta. Now, between 1683 and 1688, the City of London was governed by a royal commission. In October 1688, King James II issued a proclamation restoring the city liberties as full as before the Quo Warranto judgment. So, in other words, I think the Royal Commission, before they were fully taken over by the Zionists, had actually removed the City of London's rights. And I think he was forced to sign the proclamation, restoring the city's liberties, restoring it back to Rome and the Zionist control, working hand in hand, like the hand in the glove. Who were the money men of who controlled the money of the Vatican? The Zionists. When the Rothschilds came about, they became the official bankers of the Vatican, didn't they? And remember, he was overthrown in 1688. So there we go. The London Quo Warranto judgment reversed Act 1689 as an act of the Parliament of England. 2 Wills and Marcy 8, the long title, which is an act for reversing the judgment of a quo warranto against the City of London and for restoring the City of London and its ancient rights and privileges. What that fundamentally means is the City of London was granted its right to be a private country within England, later Great Britain, or UK PLC. A lot of shenanigans going on here. And remember, Parliament is fully controlled by the Zionists at this point. Fully controlled. The financial revolution. The financial revolution was the set of economic financial reforms in Great Britain after the Glorious Revolution. Well, we know Great Britain did not exist at that point, so it was England. In 1688, when William III invaded England, which is William of Orange, who was financed by the Zionists. The reforms were based on part of Dutch economic and financial innovations. Yeah, that were brought to England by William. New instructions were created, a public debt, and the first government bonds were issued, or gilts, pre the bank being opened in 1693, and the Bank of England was opened in 1694 to service those debt gilt bonds by holding gold and via a fiat system of creational monetary system of 10 to 1 initially. Soon thereafter, England joined stock companies, joint stock companies, so I began going public. I'm pretty sure most of the English public were not in a position to be able to afford to buy stocks and companies. A central aspect of the financial revolution was the emergence of the stock market. I wonder who controls the stock market. Didn't we have just recently the stock market shut down when silver started to go too high? I wonder who shut that down. I wonder who runs those stock markets. I think you're getting the picture. Dutch influence and change of the economy and parliamentary politics. The elements of financial revolution rested basically on the financial techniques developed in the Netherlands. The Bill of Exchange, both foreign and inland, both foreign and inland. Why would you need foreign Bill of Exchanges within the UK or England? Which, as negotiable instruments, became part of the medium of exchange transferable shares in the permanent capital stock of corporations. Remember, the Cestui Act of 1666 had been granted. We were all dead at sea at that point, so corporations could deal with us in England. And in 1660, the Feudal Act had been repealed by that same Parliament to ensure that everybody had no longer got the right to only work 40 days per year for their rent and monetary security, food security. So they've taken food security off people, forced them into longer working hours that we still have today, and the Cestui Act or Cestui Act of 1666, where everybody was dead at sea, and we therefore then have corporations being able to deal with us because we are corpses, and that's where we get the capital letters and the straw man from. So corporates that were traded to act as secondary market and perpetual government issued annuities known as consols. And remember, the tax that we're paying is to cover all of this shenanigans, any losses that these should happen. Another piece of the financial relation fundamentally altered the relation between the English Crown and the English Parliament was the creation of the Civil List in 1698. This is how Parliament granted the Crown revenues. I'll read that again. Parliament granted the Crown revenues to meet the running costs, the government and the royal establishment. So in 1698, via our taxes, we then have to start paying for Parliament and the Crown's revenues, their running costs, and the royal establishment that is Zionist controlled by this time, fully Zionist controlled. From this point on, the Crown was reliant on Parliament's control of revenue for its day-to-day running. And remember, Parliament was taken over. Oop. Now, when we go back to the original banks, they were merchant banks. This is very important. That the Italian grain merchants invented in the Middle Ages, so we're told. But the Italian grain merchants were actually Zionists. As Lombardy merchants and bankers grew in wealth, the credit base on the strength of the Lombardy plains cereal crops, many displaced Zionists fleeing Spain, Christopher Columbi, persecuted were attracted to the trade. They're already coin clipping and they're already doing usury at 30%. Because remember, usury for Muslims and Christians is against the law, but not for Jewry. So we know the Bank of England was founded in 1694 to raise £1.2 million for the government to fund a war with France. And here we go with the crux of wars. Who do you think was in charge of France at the time? Who was in charge of England at the time? Who was in charge of Holland at the time? Over 1,500 people invested their names and are contained in this book. The first names on the ledger are King William and Mary, and they invested £10,000. Bearing in mind that Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, was being paid £6,000 per annum by the Zionists. Of course, not everybody had that sort of money. Some did, didn't they? Now, let's go to more modern time. And here we have the two dragons. Remember with the Duke of Marlborough, we had two dragons on his sigil with the twin-headed eagle. That could be seen as an upside-down cross as well, couldn't it? Just saying. Just saying. Now, the City of London Corporation, it's now a corporation. Even though it's its own country, it's now a corporation. I guess you can make more money out of being a corporation than you can just a simple country. The City of London Corporation, officially and legally, the mayor and community and citizens of the City of London, and its local authority, the City of London, in the historic centre of London and the location of much of the United Kingdom's financial sector. Well, much of the United Kingdom's financial centre is a complete joke because we now know that London, the City of London Corporation, is its own private country. So much of the United Kingdom's financial centre is actually all of the United Kingdom's financial centre, which means that the United Kingdom has no money. Remember the first slide we looked at. Now, what's very interesting here is the word citizen. Very, very interesting. That's legalese. So let's just move me down here a little bit so hopefully you can see that. In 2006, the name was changed from the Corporation of London to distinguish the body governing the City of London to the Greater London Authority, the regional government of the larger Greater London administrative area. Sounds very Roman to me. It's a corporation in the sense of being a municipal corporation rather than a company. Now, the municipal corporation is quite interesting in how they actually run it. It's run by corporate bodies managing the city's affairs, based in the Guildhall in the City of London, and they meet 9 times a year, which goes down to the Magna Carta's Clause 9. Very interesting. They meet 9 times a year to reflect the Magna Carta's Clause 9 from 1275. I'm not going to read all of this out, but it's all shenanigans. It's all legalese. Freeman and livery of the city is very important, though. I don't know if there are any freemen, but the livery of the city is very interesting. And the freeman is actually the Masonic side, and the livery companies are what actually runs the City of London today. All livery companies come under the element of control by the City of London's Court of Aldermen. To become a new company, a group of people, usually numbering at least 100, and they actually have their own kind of parliament sitting. So it's a country within its country, and it actually has its own kind of parliament of 100 seats, which is based in the Guildhall, run by the Guildhall. Must satisfy the court that they have resources and willingness to continue their association indefinitely. Remember the Royal Charter we went back earlier about Clause 9 of the Magna Carta, where if you had monies that nobody could take your goods or your lands, this is why they have this clause. Can we remember that? And it's to continue their association indefinitely. They don't plan on giving any of this up by default by suddenly not having enough money. And the reason they'll never not have enough money is because you're paying your taxes to fund all this. Congratulations. Having already been long and well established, in addition to the strong ties with the square mile, the potential new company must have a significant number of members engaged in its particular trade, profession, or craft, which must not overlap or clash with that of an existing guild. Now, fundamentally, the guilds are what runs the City of London, and they could be anything from farriers to, goldsmiths to textiles, all sorts, and there's loads of them. And these are called liverymen, and they still play a pivotal role in the election of the Lord Mayor, but they actually do a lot more than that, a lot more. The livery companies of the City of London have grown up together. They share common goals since the earliest beginnings of the city. Both have strong and active support. The livery companies are integral to the government or to the city's governance, which each year liverymen elect the Sheriff of the City of London, endorse the elections of the Lord Mayor, and play a prominent role in major events. What they're not telling you about major events is they decide exactly who will run it in England, who sits in Parliament, who our Prime Minister will be. And that is done via the Masonic lodges and the liveries that control all of this. Some guilds can trace their origins back to the 12th century, the earliest charters still in existence being that of the Weavers' Company of 1115. Those working in the same craft live and work near each other's, grouping together to regulate competition. I'll read that bit again. To regulate competition within their trade. Free trade? No. They're quite clearly telling you here that the trades of England are controlled by the City of London, and those trades will also be controlled around the world via the City of London financially. It's just, but it's only to maintain high standards. You understand that, you know. So if you're doing a good job and upsetting the guilds, they won't shut your business down. They won't put the rates up, and they won't, you know, threaten you or do anything like that. No, 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 no. The early London guilds benefit their members and customers alike, controlling the manufacturing and selling of most goods and services in the square mile. So they only control the manufacturing and selling of most goods and services within the square mile. Within the square mile, there's no factories. It gets really quite nefarious after this point. Let me go back. So we have the square mile, those that work in these livery companies, they then have shell companies with different addresses around the United Kingdom or Great Britain. And because these companies have bases and all they are is postal addresses, it means that certain key wards, they have the right to vote in those key wards and overthrow and override the voting of people of or the citizens of the United Kingdom. Now, a citizen is actually somebody who's owned by Rome and is not a free person. And that's why a citizen has to pay tax, because you're part of their control mechanism and part of the Cesta V Act of the dead person. Now, we're told that the Bank of England is currently private, currently owned by the people. The bank was privately owned by stockholders from its foundation in 1694. Well, we know who they are. We've gone through that. But it was nationalised in 1946 by the Attell Ministry, and that's Clement Attell, the Prime Minister of the UK in 1946. But this is even more nefarious, obviously, it would be. Okay. So the Bank of England Act 1946 is an act of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. Again, the United Kingdom is a PLC, which came into force on the 14th of February 1946. The act brought all of the stock of the Bank of England into public ownership. Now, you might think that we own the public, the general public of the United Kingdom would own that. No. Public ownership does not mean the general public. And we'll go into that in a second. On the appointed date of the 1st of March 1946. So, in other words, the general public of the United Kingdom in 1946 purchased the Bank of England's debt from World War II that had been created by the Zionists. This was one of a series of nationalisations by post-war Labour government led by Clement Attlee. This was the creation of the debt burden of the British public via our non-public ownership of the Bank of England. The Bank of England, BOE, was formed in 1694, sorry, as a private joint stock association. So it's not a bank, it's a private joint stock association. Group of companies, liveries, in fact, that hold stock within an association. And they were granted the monopoly over the UK's money. That's very interesting, isn't it? The Bank of England was nationalised by Clement Attlee in 1946 and covertly, effectively reprivatised in 1977 through the Bank of England Nominees Limited, formed for the purpose. The Bank of England Nominees Limited. Are you on the limited company? Do you run that limited company? I wonder who does run that limited company. So in 46, it was nationalised, and in 77 was privatised through the Bank of England Nominees Limited. Very interesting. Did everybody receive a payout for this in the United Kingdom? No, they didn't. No, no. So let's go to state ownership, also called public ownership or government ownership. The government is a private corporation owned and run by the City of London. Isn't that interesting? So state ownership is also called public ownership, but has nothing to do with the general public. Is the ownership of an industry, asset, property, or enterprise by the national government of a state or country or public body representing a community as opposed to an individual or private party. I'm a private party, so I'm not part of that. Okay? Public ownership specifically refers to industries selling goods and services to consumers and differs from public goods and government services financed out of government general budget. And again, we pay the government's general budget comes from our taxes, but also from the Bank of England that prints money out of fresh air and gives it to the government to charge us interest and devalue our money via usury. Public ownership can then take place at the national, regional, local, and or municipal levels of government. Really, really is legalese, isn't it? I mean, you don't own anything, people. You're the creditor to these companies, fundamentally, is what it's saying. Look it up. Look it up. Public ownership is one of the three major forms of property ownership. You don't only own the property. Remember, you never own anything. Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? It's a good one. So how do the British war debt impact the British? The war debt from 19, from the Zionist created war, they finance both sides. Same game, they control every aspect. The war nearly doubled the British national debt from 75 million in 1756 to 133 million in 1763. Interest payments alone consumed over half the national budget. Now, we now know that the interest payments are actually to the privately owned Bank of England that sits in a country that is not part of England. And the continuing military presence in North America was a consistent drain. The empire needed more revenue to replenish its dwelling coffers. Now, 1763, what we're talking about is the wars against America, War of Independence, the American Civil War, and the shenanigans that went on from the Zionists that tried to take over the United States of America during that period, that ultimately led to the Federal Reserve and the takeover via the same Zionists via the Federal Reserve in 1913. In 1946, it was exactly the same. They used the shenanigans to do this stuff. Now, usury has always been illegal for Christians and Muslims, but in the summer of 2002, Parliament adopted new law abolishing limits of interest rates imposed by usury law. So what that means is those in charge of us can charge whatever they want in debt slavery on interest and can fundamentally control us in any way they want. Digital ID and digital money by crypto. The Usury Laws Repealed Act formally just got rid of the concept of usury from English law and allowed the parties to agree on what the rate ought to be. So there we go. So your taxes can go up to whatever level they want because fundamentally it's usury and you're paying the interest of the debt created by the Zionists in 1693. And there we go. Now, I'm sorry it's a long one. It's always going to be. So, who are we paying our taxes to? Why are we paying taxes? And this isn't just the UK, this is every single country around the world, now controlled by your central bank. You know, I think it was 1873 or 18 something, yeah, something like that, that the Rothschilds took over the banking systems. But fundamentally, they only took over because they were handed the baton over by their own Zionist friends. So the UK has no money. Great Britain has no money. England has no money. Scotland has no money. Wales has no money. And Ireland has no money. Northern Ireland, that is. Because all the money is controlled via a private country that's put itself into a corporation and a trust, helped along by a treasonous parliament and monarchy to keep you enslaved in debt slavery and servitude as a citizen of the Roman Vatican control mechanism. And remember, if you don't behave, the Americans with their jackboots will come along via the Washington DC system of District of Columbia to give you a little piece of democracy via the end of a gun. Because in 1913 we know that that was the end of America and your freedom and any rights you really, really thought you ever had. So, it sounds quite grim and dangerous and sad, but actually, when you know this stuff and you understand it, and you can see what the skullduggery is and the shenanigans, you can then start to see that crypto is pointless and the fiat money we have is pointless. And the only real money is gold and silver, and that's why they shut the CME trading system off to stop the silver going up to collapse the banks. The only thing the City of London manufactures is debt, and it creates debt, and we are the debtees, and we pay taxes to pay that debt. And it's exactly the same in every country around the world, because every single country is now controlled by, literally every single country is controlled by that same Zionist movement that took over the world in 1694 with the creation of the Bank of England, but ultimately via Oliver Cromwell in 1649. And with that, everybody, I shall say goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye, everyone.